session. Recording in progress. This session is relates to a project idea that I hope that you can take and use. I'll give you a document. I'll share it with you in a moment, but that has a lot of instructions, and you could implement this into your classroom tomorrow if you wanted, though I tend to save this project for wrapping up a semester or even the end of the year. And it's not Voces specific, and that's intentional because it's really an invitation for you to take outside resources and weave them into what you're doing with Voces. If you're a veteran teacher and maybe you've come from a more traditional style textbook and you're kind of warming up to the Voces curriculum, this is saying, use your oldies but goodies, use your old projects alongside you as you move your way through the Voces curriculum. But of course, the project does relate to Voces in that it's about telling stories, writing stories. And I'm a firm believer that when you have a story, you have so much to talk about, right? Like if you have a story, you have a text. That means you've got characters that you can describe. That means you have plot points that you can go over first, second, third, after, before, what someone will do, what someone would do. So I think just stories give us endless possibilities in the classroom, and this particular project is a chance for you to get your students creating some output. So many of us, maybe if we're moving into CI and if we're using the Voces curriculum, we might find ourselves being the generators of the input, providing lots of spoken content for students to consume, giving them a lot of written content for them to consume. And we might find ourselves holding off from giving a project, especially a group project, because our students are going to speak in English. And we might think, I don't know if I really want that. I've been working so hard to, create this environment in my classroom where students are speaking in the target language. But I do think there's really a place for this. And I'll talk to you about some of the why that goes along with it. So the project, it comes from an idea by Ben Slavic and Tina Hargadon. They wrote a book called A Natural Approach to Stories. And has anyone read this book or familiar with their work? Yeah, some nods. So they have a very free-form approach to language instruction. They're not necessarily teaching from the Voces drop-down menu and hitting all those different activities and points. They're having conversations with their students in class. They're doing a lot of story creation, and from there, the vocabulary that they want to teach emerges. Different grammar points that they want to teach emerge, and maybe not in a typical sequence. And we do that too. I do that in my classroom, and Voces has some of that in its curriculum. Like the star of the day or special person interviews are very free form. You don't know what vocabulary is going to come out of those conversations sometimes. And that's what I think makes them really magical. And likewise with the story scripts that are part of Voces, you have the opportunity to, create some surprising storylines with your students, although those are more structured. But you may see, I'll share my screen here. If you are using the story scripts inside Voces, this is the level 3 book. This would be where you're saying to your students, okay, we've got a character. What's his name? They give you the name Campbell here that's underlined, but your students will be providing you with some other name that's interesting. And what Tina and Ben said in this book was that when they were doing story creation, and they probably weren't working off a script that was this structured, they would have students say things like a celebrity, like, oh, Beyonce. And in their beginnings as story creators with their students, they were saying, it kind of fell flat because what else could you really say about Beyonce, I guess, then she's a singer. And so they were looking for something that would be more rich, more that would foster or, build more creativity in the classroom. And they came up with this idea of the invisibles. And they call it the invisibles because they have students kind of create this object character out of thin air, and they're very theatrical about it and kind of shape the object with their hands. And they don't like allow themselves to cross through where this object is coming to life. And that's very much their style. My style is a little different, and your style will be different than my style. But there was something there that I really liked. This idea of not having a person necessarily be the character in a story that students were going to create, but rather a mundane object, something that, you know, people wouldn't really give any thought to on a normal basis, and tasking students with bringing this object to life. So this is a routine that Tina and Ben do, just creating these objects like on a weekly basis in their classes. And for me, I made this like a one-off, like this was a project, but the beginning step of this project that I'm going to share with you is something that you could do with regularity. And so I want to demo that now together. And I'm also going to share the document with you at this time, and I'm going to post it in the chat. So I'm copying the link and throwing this up in the chat. It's a multi-page document. I'll give you a couple minutes to, you know, just kind of like scroll through it and orient yourself. You won't be able to read it all now, but I'm going to put this on my screen as well. Okay. So if you've opened the document, you'll see this kind of intro. The basic gist is that you and a partner, it's a group project, are going to write, illustrate, and produce a storybook. Here's some student work. So I bought these like thin binders, and I bought protective sleeves. And when students opened up the binder, there was always text on one side and a matching image on another. And that the instructions for all of this follow in the rest of the document. This is an example of one of the objects that students created. So this was about a baseball named Major and his great adventure. This one was about a fork named Forky. So you're really just picking something that's mundane, but it has an exciting backstory. And for me, I'm teaching in a school that's kind of straddling working with CI and acquisition driven instruction, and still holding on to the vestiges of a traditional curriculum. So preterite and imperfect is a topic that we teach in level 2 and in level 3 that may or may not resonate with you. So if you take this project and you make it your own, you copy it, you could just, you know, take this out if you're not interested in talking about explicit grammar. You don't need to tell your students that. Or if you're in a school that is making sure that you check those grammar boxes, then you could put something like this, depending on what you wanted to focus on. I think for all of us as language teachers, we all really want to make sure that our students know how to talk and write in the past tense. So I think this is just one that would work anywhere. Maybe in level 1, you would be still, I don't know whether you would be, I haven't taught level 1 in a while in this way, but you could do it in the present tense, or just adapt it for your particular level. So where I want you to scroll down, this is like a sample story that you can skip over. That's in Spanish. I provided it in English too, just because I know not all of us speak Spanish. But I want you to come down here to where it says process, and this is kind of like how I lay this out in class. So we'll begin this project by brainstorming different objects together as a class. And I tell my students this in English. I do the brainstorming in Spanglish, but I want them to get excited about creating a character, about having a good foundation for a story. And I want to see some of the class personality come out. So that's why I choose to present in English. But I mentioned that Tina and Ben do this particular exercise that I'm going to demo with you regularly. So, you know, the more you do something, the less you need to rely on L1 to make sure that it's clear. And after a while, it just becomes a process that everyone's used to. So rather than just saying, let's think of an object, I like to present categories of objects. So you could have students throw out categories of objects, or you might decide, I want to focus them. So I'm going to focus us today. We're leading up to our spring vacation at our school. I don't know, show of hands, have people gone on spring vacation yet at their schools? No. Okay. When are your spring vacations? You can unmute or you can put it in chat.
Can I eat something? I'm hungry.
April.
Eat something.
Mine's not until the first week of April.
The first week of April. Okay. So April vacation. So Erin, I don't know if you can mute this person, but okay. So I'm going to say, because maybe we're all hungry for vacation. We know that that's coming soon for my colleagues. It's I'm on maternity leave. So I'm not at school, but my colleagues have it this week. I actually have COVID right now. I thought that I was going to, make it without getting it. Here I am with COVID. So being on Zoom, it's all very deja vu for me, but let's see. So I'm going to say for us, I want us to brainstorm objects that have to do with spring. And let's just demo it. So we'd be doing this in English. Let's come up with objects that have to do with spring. You can put it in the chat. Let me find my chat again, or you can just unmute yourself. And let's see what people come up with. Oh, okay. So in the chat, pollen. Tulips, blade of grass, rain. Oh, these are awesome. And so okay, we're using the chat to really generate ideas, but when you're in class and the ideas are coming, there's that energy where someone suggests something and everyone's like, oh, pollen, yeah, I know I have allergies. So you'd be kind of playing off of the energy of the class to I think help you decide which object you really want to focus on here. Oh, these are so good. Let's see. I don't even know. I see Ariane, Keith, Alicia, and Heidi still have their screens on. Can I involve you a little bit more since your screens are okay? Alicia, is one of these calling out to you?
I really like the watering can idea. If you're thinking about a more subtle object.
A watering can idea. Awesome. Okay. Anybody else watering can, or is there a different one? Ariane, is there one that's speaking to you?
I put down watering can.
You put down what? Okay. We got to do the watering can. I mean, that's fate. Okay. So we're going to do a watering can. And this is one of those times where, I'm trying to think of the word for watering can in Spanish in my target language, and I can't think of it. Does anyone know the word for watering can in Spanish?
I only know it in French.
Oh, what is it in French?
It's similar though. It's
arrosoir.
as well, but I think it's similar in Spanish.
It's regadera in Spanish.
Regadera.
Okay, never mind.
Sorry, Heidi.
Yeah, like regar. Okay, yeah, regadera. So at this point, you would reveal the vocab words. You would say, la regadera. We're going to create a story about la regadera. And you could be doing it depending on your level in Spanish, your target language, or in Spanglish, or in English still. For me, I would stop. I actually, I've shared this before in presentations, but in my younger years of teaching, sometimes I would feel like, they caught me with a word I didn't know, and I would feel really insecure about that. But now I like sometimes when I don't know a word and I just model for them, like, oh, let's look this up. This is so exciting. This is an opportunity to learn a new word. If you're not a native speaker, which I'm not. And I have lots of close family ties to Spain and was going there yearly, but I haven't traveled in 3 years, so I feel like I'm really feeling that I relied a lot on that yearly immersion, and I feel it kind of draining. So I'm excited to eventually get back to mi gente in Spain again. So la regadera, this is going to be our object, and then from here we really need to build out this object a little bit more. So if you're on the document, I'm gonna scroll. Oh, it's already there. So you have these attributes that you could ask about the object to kind of give it more life, but you don't need to go through all 8 of those categories. And in this book, you know, this is like a cornerstone of their teaching, creating these stories off of these inanimate objects. So they have even more than that. But I would say for me personally, and I'm putting this in the chat, getting the physical characteristics of the object, and some of that's in like in this list. So the size, the color, maybe the emotional expression, that's kind of giving you the physical characteristics. But I would say physical, the name of the book is A Natural Approach to Stories. And it's I don't know if you've just joined, you might not have that in the chat, but Erin just put it in the link. You can buy it through Teachers Discovery. But I want to make sure once we've determined the object, la regadera, that we're going to do the physical characteristics, and then just like the emotional vibe of the object. And I would say happy or sad, basically, is what it comes down to, and a name. So with those 3 things, I think you've got a lot where you can go, but you can choose to build this out, and you wouldn't necessarily put this on the board. These would be either in the back of your mind because you're so used to doing it, because you do it regularly, or maybe it's on a sticky note, or it's like on a notebook that you're glancing down at. So, okay, so I've got my people that have been participating. We've got La Regadera. Do you think it's big? Like, is it a huge regadera, or is it a really tiny regadera? What do you think?
Huge.
Huge. Heidi says it's huge. Alicia's nodding. It's huge. Oh, es gigante, Carla says. Yeah. Oh, Marta said it's pequeña. So it looks like people are kind of going with Spanish with me. I'm going to do this in Spanglish because, again, just depending on the level of my class, the vibe of the class, how much we practice certain vocabulary words, I will tend more toward Spanish or more toward English. So, okay, everyone's saying this is enorme, it's grande, and I would do that. I would try and use all of those cognates. I would try and be theatrical about it. What else can we say about it physically? So we know we've got this big regadera. What color is it? Keith, do you have thoughts on color?
I'll use a little Spanish I know. Is it
Oh,
rojo?
good. Rojo, yeah. Oh, and you have people in the chat saying rojo. Melanie agreed with you, rojo. So here you could say, you know, depending on the level, just as you're building out these descriptions, you could be like, ooh, you know, rojo como la camisa de Anatolia. You can see her on her image. She's got a red shirt on. So you could pick like the clothing of someone in the room, or rojo como este libro. You could like build on the color asking. Okay, so we know it's red. What about does it have any very unique features? Like does it have an interesting handle or a really interesting spout? Oh, Carla says it's fat. So it's enormous and it's short. What about like interesting features, either facial features? Oh, it's broken. Jessica, which part of it's broken? Elisa said it's got wrinkles. This poor regadera, it's very beat up. Okay, its spout is broken. So at this point, I will say, I love to draw. And actually, when I first started teaching, I was very nervous. And a teacher that had taught me, who's kind of a mentor, had said to me, you know, drawing is your superpower. Like if the kids are ever acting out of line, just start drawing something on the board. And that really gave me confidence as a young teacher going in, like, okay, I can draw. If things go badly, I can draw. And so I do draw a lot in my classes. So I tend to, when I'm presenting this, draw what the students are saying, and that's just part of my personality. And I think all of us, it's like, you know, we're teaching language, but we're drawing from all of our talents and all of our life experiences, and we're kind of like bringing it all into what we deliver to our students. Tina and Ben in this book, in A Natural Approach to Stories, they will have like, they do this so regularly that they have like 2 easels in the back of their room with big life-size paper. There's a roll for the art. I mean, they have it all built out. So either you could draw if you feel comfortable doing that. Someone I think said, I have trouble drawing stick people. Sometimes I think like not being able to draw is also a superpower. I think people find it really funny if something isn't represented well or typically. But yeah, you could either have students do this or you could do it yourself. So I'm going to do it. So let's see. We've got a watering can with a broken spout. It's big. Okay. I don't really know. I haven't drawn. I feel like I'm gonna draw a teapot. I haven't drawn a watering can in a long time,
When
but
it comes to citing sources,
huh? So there's its broken little spout, I guess, the watering can, la regadera. And what about its face? Does it have big eyes or small eyes? What do we think? Big, small? Just show me with it. Oh,
Grande.
beautiful big eyes. Okay. So it's got a broken spout, but it still has its beauty. And then I said, you know, we need to come up with the emotional state for this thing. So do we think it's happy or it's sad? I mean, it's broken. What do we think? Happy or sad? Oh, contenta. I think, oh, that's interesting. Very sad, very tired. Happy that it's happy, even though it's not perfect. That's nice. Oh, I'm seeing Neela. This is a new face on the screen. What do you think? Like, there's people are putting a lot of different emotions in here, which is great. And in a higher level class, I think you could definitely do that. But like, let's say we're in a basic level class, or we just want to keep it simple. Happy or sad? What do you think, Neela?
Contenta.
Contenta, happy. Okay.
Mhm.
Very, very happy. Like very, very, muy contenta. Or
Muy contenta.
contenta. Okay, so no muy, just contenta. Okay. So here's our little regadera. So we have this character, and it needs a name. We've got a happy regadera, a regadera contenta. Pero necesita un nombre. Oh, Rosita. Oh, it's red. Rosita la regadera. Oh, I like the alliteration too. So, and you know, taking these suggestions, it's again just up to you to feel out the vibe of the classroom. You know, you might want to take more suggestions. Maybe there's a really quiet student. Maybe your students have whiteboards and they're holding up their suggestions. I mean, there's all different ways that you could draw out their participation in this. But once you have like a little character going, you want to make sure that the students are like emotionally invested in it. So I don't know whether we're emotionally invested in Rosita la regadera yet or not. So that's when I might go back to this list under process, and I might try and generate some more laughter or some like more wackiness so that I feel like people are really bought into this. I found in the time that I did this, the catchphrase idea seemed to really be one that like the students like to come up with. So if anyone wants to throw out a possible catchphrase, something that this broken regadera would say over and over again, that can sometimes be something like in developing this character that points you in the direction of where your plot might go eventually. So this process, depending on what else is going on in your classroom, could take the majority of the class, depending on how slow you go and how much you circle through the questions, or you could keep going through. When I presented this, tried to get my class behind this project, and we were throwing out ideas and we were developing our character and drawing it, I said, okay, she needs a sidekick. Rosita needs a sidekick. And you'll see in the document that I've given you that eventually your students are going to develop a secondary character. So I like that catchphrase, Kristen. Rosita riega sus rosas rojas. That means Rosita waters her red roses. But I need a secondary character. So who might tag along? Who might be involved with a broken regadera? You can throw this in the chat too. Oh, a mariposa, a butterfly. Oh, a tea bag, a hose, a worm. This is perfect. So a frog. I like the idea of the hose. Aaron, oh, that's yours. Okay, I'm going to take the hose. Una manguera. I do know the word for that one. And Aaron, I like to say, and this is further down in this document, but when you're coming up with a secondary character, again, I just like to keep it really simple. Friendly or enemy? Amigo and amigo. Is there tension or are they bonded? What do you think, Aaron? It's your suggestion. Aaron says no. Aaron's like, I'm just the moderator. Enemy.
No, I said enemy, but just to make it interesting.
Just to make it interesting. Okay. So you've got, everyone else wanted them to be friends. Somos amigos, but we're going to go with Aaron's. Aaron, do you still want them to be enemies, even though?
No, let's make them friends.
Okay.
They'll be
okay,
cute. They'll help each other out.
They'll help each other out. Ooh. Ligia says novio. So we've got maybe some romantic interest in here. This is interesting. Okay, so we've got this regadera that's rota. We've got a manguera that's friendly toward it. And so now we've got like two elements that are going to drive the story. And then the next thing is there's got to be a problem. Any good story has a problem that needs to be solved. And again, like you're rolling this out with your class. So you're just trying to show them how you might develop an interesting character, how you can kind of create emotional attachment into the characters. And depending on whether you just want this to be like a one-off project that you're getting them started with, you might go fast, or you could really use this process of asking questions and developing characteristics to teach a lot of language and circle a lot of language. And that's something that they do in this book a lot. Ligia says they need to find water together. Oh, so they're out of water. So they don't have water access. That's interesting. And so like when I presented this for the first time to my students, we got through the main character, we got through the secondary character, and then we were kind of throwing out some possible problem ideas. And at that point I said, okay, tonight, you guys, you're going to be in pairs and you're going to do a project in teams together. And, this is kind of how it started. So that was as far as I took my students. I just generated a lot of kind of excitement and, wonder around this project idea. And then beyond that, I kind of unleashed them into their teams. I had them working in pairs. I gave them this document to start. So that first homework assignment was basically, now go home and do it again. Like come up with another character, come up with another inanimate object, come in the next day and be prepared to present your character that you came up with to your partner. I want you to draw it. And I kind of talked to them about how to draw it. Like, do not go into intensive shading. You just want a very general design, use a Sharpie, use some colored pencils. And so then the next day the students came in and they were like so excited to share what they had come up with. And some of them had gone through all of those 8 criteria that you see in process and had done a catchphrase and a hometown and all this stuff. And so then I had them in groups kind of talking about which character they thought that they really wanted to take and develop into their story. So let's see. Okay, one word that I do want to say is I mentioned at the start of this that This is a bit of a departure, especially if you're having your students, not the story, not asking about the character and describing the character and all of that. That can absolutely take place in the target language, but having this project to make this storybook and working in pairs is going to bring a lot of English into the classroom. And so you want to be thinking about when would be a good time for that to happen. Do you want that to happen even? Martha, I see, can the student do the drawing for the teacher? Absolutely. Yeah, I was saying that before, that you could have a student artist. You could have several student artists. You could handle the art part however you want, but you definitely want a visual to go along with what you're creating. So for me, I think, you know, my students are using Voces. They're on the screen a lot. I've heard teachers say, you know, I'm using the Voces curriculum, but they're getting a little like by the third story, they're kind of, so those are times where you really want to think, how am I going to get them off of their screens? How am I going to give them a little break from the groove that we've been in? And I loved this because you know, it was good for them, and that class was very loose and unstructured. It was good for me because I had this project that I had steps. I knew it was going to take like about 10 days, and I didn't have to lesson plan it all that week. So it was just like a great, you know, and then as they get into the art part of the project, you can have some music playing, you can have kids sharing supplies. It created for me what I really needed at that moment in time in my classroom. And I think we all know like when that takes, or maybe you're sick with COVID and you need to leave some kind of sub plan. And this is something that, you know, someone could monitor students as they're working on. So after I put them in their pairs and I had them choose a character that they were going to develop, then they're basically following this chart. So you would want to turn to the chart in the document or just follow me on the screen. And I mentioned that at the end of the project, they have these thin binders, and the text and the artwork are in these protective sleeves. And every time that they open this little italics here, every time they open a spread, there is text on the left and matching artwork on the right. So each time you open, you're seeing, you're seeing, even though these things are paired together, it's like page 3 and 4 open, you have setting text, setting art. You have secondary character text, secondary character art. But before students start like working with the final product, I have them use a book dummy. So I mentioned that up here, just above the format. And a book dummy is just blank pages that are stapled together. Every single student gets a book dummy that'll mirror this setup. So I just handed out, I kind of like figured out what that would look like, stapled them together, handed them out to students and said like, okay, at the top of this right front, at the top of this right main character, text. And so we kind of set it up so they knew how it was going to open. And then I said to them, you and your partner are going to work on this in class. So they were not on their screens. That was really important to me too, that it was just, this is a non-screen activity. You're going to use your brain. You're going to use your partner's brain. You're going to use other people in the classroom's brain to write as much of this in the target language as you can. And when you come across that, let's say you want to use the word watering can and you don't know the word watering can, when you come across that, that's okay. You're going to write it in English and underline it. And that'll kind of come up later on. I have students underline and put in bold any new word that they absolutely needed to put into their story. And and this is something that I always do with my students, but this is where it says important. They either had to like label that new word in their artwork. So maybe it was, she was wearing a tie-dyed shirt and like you can see the tie-dye design, and they would label in the artwork the word for tie-dye. Or if there wasn't really a way to label it, they would put in parentheses like a circumlocution that would kind of help the reader understand, because what I didn't want is for a pair to look up all these specialized words, and then when students shared their stories, for them not to be able to understand what vocabulary they were dealing with. So if I pop back up to the top to my sample story, you can see like here I underlined looked like is when you and another person are identical. That's a word in Spanish that doesn't necessarily, it's not a cognate, so they would need to explain that. Over here, the fridge is underlined. So I didn't do this, but I would label right here, like nevera, fridge. So the students work on the book dummies together in class, and they're just following this structure. So this really helps them kind of like stick to a coherent plot and not get, I mean, there's a formula to it, but it does help. And you can get at things that you really want to review. So, you know, I wanted to go over weather terminology. We talked about the weather a lot in my class. So here's a link where you can review the weather, but you could direct your students wherever you want to direct them. We go over the time a lot, so I wanted to throw that in there. You could leave that or take it out. And then the questions kind of help them keep generating a plot point, but they've got these two really compelling characters. They have the character that they're emotionally invested in, that's kind of wacky, a random object, a secondary character, and then this is going to like help them keep it going. And then at the end, I have the students write a little about the author page, a sobre el equipo, and this is just them again recycling that same, being able to present who you are. So there's a lot of opportunities for you to reinforce things that you're probably already talking about with your students in class. And if you get into a routine doing this, like the more you do these little character stories, the easier it is for them to say things like, you know, it was 5 o'clock. We had just done a story or a little movie that involved Once Upon a Time. So I threw that in just because it tied into what we had just done, but you could take that out and just have there was as a starting point of your story. So I'm going to stop there because I've been talking for a long time and just see if there are questions before I continue. And you can either, yeah, Campbell.
Hey, when you do partner work, right? So I see you have partners. How do you divide up the work for that? Because sometimes I struggle to have like it equal, having not one kid depending totally on the other kid.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. For this particular project, I said you are getting the same grade. But sometimes I've done projects where the grade's individual. If there's like a presentation, like maybe they've presented together and their presentation quality is different. I like to kind of help make sure that one person isn't just carrying the full weight of this project. I give them a lot of class time to work on it. So it's a project that they're doing in class and they're also doing at home. I'm aware of who's been assigned what. Oh, what are you, I'll come around to the different groups. What are you doing tonight? Okay, you're doing this artwork, that artwork, or just checking in with them. How are you guys feeling about the workflow here? And then this is something I will add on to the document at the end of this, but I'm going to switch tabs for a second. I had a little project reflection where it was like, what are 3 things your partner did to help you? So you can kind of build in, if you have a reflection at the end, maybe some accountability to the other partner, either positive or negative. I was playing around with that. But yeah, I ended up giving them the same grade. And I think that's okay too, when there are challenges, as long as the students have a chance to reflect or debrief with you in some way. So if there's a kid that totally dropped the ball in an ideal world, it would be good for you to be able to like talk to those partners about like what didn't go well and what could go better in the future. But yeah, that is kind of inviting a Pandora's box. I'm making that sound like there's never any problem, but I definitely had a problem once with like a very grade hungry student that felt it was totally unfair that she was paired with these students that, you know, weren't up to her caliber. And I just kind of, yeah.
So do you actually, so you assign the pairs, then you don't let them pick their friends or something like that?
In this particular project, I've done everything. I mean, one time I did a project, like a video project that involved 3 people, and one person needed to be really outgoing. One person needed to be like a little more behind the scenes. And then one person needed to be very detail oriented. And I started that by putting like outgoing, detail oriented. I put like 3 main qualities on the board, and I said like, you know, where do you think you fall? Like where do you think your strengths are? And so I kind of like had the kids according to their strengths. And then I was like, okay, this is a team, this is a team. So I think you could do it in different ways, where you are like helping students form teams based on the strengths that you think are going to be needed in a group, or you can do it because you just, for your own sanity, you need to pair people that are going to match up well together, or you could do it randomly. I mean, I think it's just what you think will serve your overarching goals for the group work. Let's see. I see someone saying, may I ask why? Would you recommend against more than 2 partners per group? I think it depends on the size of, well, again, it depends on like what your end goal is. So at this particular point in time, when I assigned this project, I was feeling really overwhelmed with grading. And I was like, at first I was gonna have every kid do their own story. And then I was like, this is going to take me forever to grade. No, I'm going to pair them up. So now I have half the amount to grade. And maybe if you need to, if you have a huge class, maybe put them in 3s, because it just, that's one way I've found that you can like help yourself with grading overload, is just pairing students. So I have an exchange student at our school from Spain. So would you have the student by themselves? It's a small class. I don't know. That's a good question. Yeah, there are always, I had a girl in the middle of this project that got concussed, and she like missed a bunch of schools. So then one person finished the project on her own, and then she had to come back. I don't know. You kind of have to, that's the kind of part of teaching where you have to, I think, you know, it's like an art. You have to figure out what would make sense. I'm looking for the study I read about it. The study said that students paired at the same level, they build up better than otherwise. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I think there's so much cool research out there about like how different students can help one another in project-based work. I wasn't quite so scientific about it. I just, you know, paired up these students and had them work in teams. I guess as I'm looking at the partner pairings, like this was a group here that there were some really like funky personality dynamics and things that administrators had told me about. This person can't really be near this person, so I had to be really like crafty about who got paired with whom there. So yeah, so you just kind of unleash them in their class to work on this project, and you can play music, you can have it be a relaxed setting, you can have them bring in their colored pencils, you can have supplies, and they just kind of go through this process in their book dummy first. They're all finishing at different times. I have a saying in my class, like I heard this saying, ask 3 then me, which I really liked, so that, you know, you're not just working with your partner, but you have some cross-pollination of people crossing over into different groups to get information. But I liked that ask 3 then me rhymed. So I came up with habla con tres conmigo después, like talk with three with me afterwards if you want to do something like that. But eventually I would look at the finished book dummy and then I would say, okay, you can put this on a Google Doc. And then that was shared with me, and they were kind of coming in at different times. Sometimes there were times where they all finished at once and I'm like, ugh, I have 3 of these to look over, but more or less I tried to be circulating and kind of catching issues as they arose and looking over things as they were developing, to keep the work manageable for me as well. And then let's see, I'm just looking here at the chat. Comic strips. Allynn, do you have students leave the words in English in English? No. So eventually they will, like, once I've approved their book dummy and they've underlined the words in English, then I say, okay, you're ready to move on to the final draft phase. So look up these words tonight and think about, as I put here in the format, think about at the end, be sure to underline and put in bold new words you had to look up, and you're going to either need to define them or label them on their drawing. Then it came time for me to grade this, and I was using a rubric. Hold on, I want to catch this. You said it's an 8 to 10 day project. Are they roughly doing the rough draft over 4 to 5 day, then art and the final book? Yeah, I would say that. Yeah, they're working on the project. They're working on the book dummy. They're also kind of working on the art. Some of them got really into the art and wanted to mock up the art during class, and I would just give them reminders of, you know, this is going to be due on such and such date, or I didn't really know how long it was going to take at the time, but I'm like, I'm aiming for, you know, for this period. Or I might come up and redirect a student and say, you know, like, I think this is great, but why don't you try and work more on the text now in class, so I can help you with it, and then, you know, let's do the text first and save the drawing. But yeah, it was kind of a mix of how students wanted to use their time. And I think that also is valuable for students too, to see like, oh, I wasted all my time doing this one drawing, and now I have a lot more to do the night before it's due, or now my partner's getting stressed out. So all of that I think is just useful in terms of students tackling something that's not like a quick worksheet, but something that's taking more time and involves collaborating with another person. So then the projects came in, and I had this rubric in mind that I was going to use, and I was like freaking out about it, because I don't know if you guys have had this experience, but you know, sometimes you get a rubric and the rubric's so detailed that it's like painstaking trying to go through and, you know, did the student use 5 words, and you're just like, why am I using this rubric? So I was talking with a colleague, and she was saying, you know, the College Board has these scoring guidelines for presentational writing. And what I do, this is my colleague Dara, she was saying that she just uses a highlighter, and she highlights what she thinks corresponds to the student work that's in front of her. And so that's what I tried to kind of explain here. If the majority of my highlighter is in the strong category, you'll earn an A. If you've got a mix of goods and fairs, it'll be a B minus. And then I just did that. I took a highlighter and did it. And I kind of ballparked the figure. I wrote some notes on the side. I photocopied them, you know, once to give to each partner. And that made the grading of this pretty fast. And I liked that. So I throw that out to you as a way to have a rubric, but not like one of those really painstaking rubrics. And so then you could do the reflection if students are finishing at different times. Like if you're like, you've got a kid that's super into it and they're just in the zone, and you're like, shoot, like I need this to last 4 more days. You could have them, well, I have like optional art. So I had on here, like you could have back cover art optional. You know, they could extend it that way. You could have them fill out the reflection, although I think everyone should fill out the reflection. You could have them record their story out in the hallway and bring it into you to hear. You could have them make a video acting out the story. I mean, you could just think of ways that you can extend it. Wanda says, do you use the proficiency ratings? I didn't on this project. No, sometimes we have. I think my department's kind of away from that right now in terms of how we're assessing. But yeah, you could assess this, you know, however you see fit. Or like, I think what's important too is that your students are used to your way of assessing. So, you know, if you're using the Voces rubrics, and actually, I was thinking about this today, but
Actually, Allynn,
yeah,
I'm gonna
Oh,
have to
go
cut
ahead.
you. And I'm sorry I was like trying to do it at a perfect time, but seriously, that was so fun to hear. It's such a great idea.
Oh, good.
And like, I want to be in your class. You know, that's what I always feel like every time I see you present. I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to do that project. It just sounds so
Aw,
fun.
Thank you.
And I do want to remind everyone that Allynn has like more amazing ideas like this in her teacher's guide to our story, which we've been putting in the chat, like links to where you can find out more information about that. And Allynn will be presenting again in this spring. I forget exactly when, but I think it's in April.
April 26th, I think.
Awesome.
Yeah, and it's sort
Um,
of a preview to what's happening this summer.
At the CI Summit. Yeah. So it's very exciting. And I also want to say, Allynn, I mean, I have way too much to say that we don't have time for, but I want to say you just presented so well given the fact that you have COVID. So thank you for powering through, and I hope you are just
I know
like,
I have a new
better.
baby. I'm on maternity leave. I've been like in an N95 all day. So I was so excited to come in here and just like take the mask off. And yeah, I know it's crazy, but thank you guys so much. And oh, I'll put my this is my work email.
Awesome. And you can also like answer some questions in the chat when we transition. I'm going to stop recording.
Okay.